You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It is season 3. It's episode 83. The 2024 Cubs infield grades. Don't forget to listen, download, review. Most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow on the socials, Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram, and of course, you can find us on Facebook or email us, flythew670@gmail.com. All right, Crawly. Award season is coming up, and we are in the middle of the LCS series.
Yep, we got all sorts of things going on, but one thing we want to kind of look at today is our annual grading of the position show and kind of just seeing what happened this year and whatnot. A couple of things to kind of keep in mind, and for those of you watching on the 670 Score YouTube channel, some information about the 2024 Cubs. We talked how they finished 83-79, one game worse than last year. At Wrigley, 44-36, it's all right, not great. On the road, 39-42. On season openers or series openers, they were 25-27. Rubber matches, they were 10-12. Home series 13-12-1. Road series 10-14-2. And Dustin, when you look at this, you can see where everything kind of fell apart in the season when you go month by month. In March and April, they were 18-12. May, they were 10-18. And June, 11-16. So just right there, that's what killed you. And then July, 13-12. August, when they were making that run, they went 18-8, but they ran out of gas once again in September to go 13-12. So as we kind of take a look at what the Cubs really need for next season, you know, it's important to see what they had and how they did this year. When it comes to offense, we want to get a baseline reading for how the players did on offense compared to the rest of the league in 2024. Dustin, you and I grew up at a different time as far as offense in baseball is concerned. So this is for context for our listeners so they know this. In 2024, the average batting average, do you know what it is, Dustin? An average hitter, what they would hit?
238.
243.
Okay.
So an average hitter hits 243. An average on base percentage is 312, and an average slug is 399. So that gives you an average slash line of 243, 312, 399. So offense continues to be down around the league, but that's a different topic for a different show. I don't know how they're going to fix that. Now, Dustin, one thing to keep in mind when we talk about the offense is Wrigley, and Jed has been sure to mention it plenty of times, is that the park factors at Wrigley as far as the weather is concerned. This year, Wrigley Field was 29th out of 30 ballparks as far as being a not hitter-friendly park. When it comes to home runs, 25th, fly balls, 27th. So you want to kind of be around 100 with these park factors. So this is the lowest home run park factor for Wrigley Field since 2013. And so if you remember 2013, that was a pretty crappy year. And I think it was a 100-loss season, if memory serves me correctly. So it did not play well. A lot of fly balls. I think they said on average, it averaged about 6 feet of difference it took off those balls. So a lot of balls that may have been home runs other years just didn't go out. So when we look at how each player did defensively, we're going to use two different stats. Outs above average, which focuses solely on how many outs a fielder makes above or below the average for a given play of difficulty. And then defensive runs and saves. That's the attempt to quantify how many runs a fielder saved or cost their team based on overall defensive performance. The main difference between those two stats, outs above average looks at the probability of making an out on each play, while DRS looks at the overall impact of those plays on the score of the game. We're also going to look at a couple splits, and some of them are kind of eye-popping when I was going through them. And so when we talk about fielding a little bit, Dustin, the Gold Glove finalists were announced by Rawlings. I was listening to the Mully and Haw show this morning, like I always do. Yeah. And, there's no surprise that Ian Happ is back in it and Dansby Swanson is back in it. As far as Nico Hoerner, he will not defend his Gold Glove, but honestly, I didn't think that was a huge oversight, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one to judge. I mean, I'll raise a hand. I don't watch baseball. Like, I don't grind on the other teams outside of the division a little bit, right? Like, if you're saying that the Arizona Diamondbacks second baseman had a better year, okay. I mean, I'll take your word for it, right? I just don't grind on it that way. thought Nico was good at times. He had flashes, but there were also times when he wasn't as good as he was in the past. But I have a hard time. He wasn't an all-star. If you're not an all-star, I don't know how you're going to be a Gold Glover.
I mean, they're two separate things, and
I understand that, but I'm just saying that's my measuring stick. I mean, I don't even think you're in the conversation. If you're not an all-star at your position, then how in the world would you be a Gold Glover at your position?
Well, let me give you an example. I think the biggest oversight in this list is PCA not making the Gold Glove. Now, if PCA is just let's say just 240 hitter, slightly below average, not hit, let's say again, 10 home runs. Okay, that's not an all-star. But if you're telling me he's not the best defensive center fielder in baseball, you're crazy. And that's what the Gold Glove measures.
All right. So let's talk about center field first then. Let's start there. We're there. Let's start there. I tried to zoom in. I couldn't zoom in on your graphic there. Who's in the conversation? Somebody from Colorado, I think I saw. Is that right?
Yeah, it's someone from Colorado, and I want to make sure I get this right. And so for the nominees for the center fielders, you had for the finalists, let's take a look. So if you're taking a look at the National League, we're going to go National League, and we are looking at.
Oh, that's all that should matter, by the way. There are two sets of Gold Glovers, just to be, this is something else that came up on the Mully and Haw show this morning. There are two sets of Gold Glovers, right? There's an American League Gold Glove winner, and there's a National League Gold Glove winner. There's not a Gold Glove winner for baseball.
Right. Brenton Doyle is the center fielder of the Rockies. He's one of the finalists. Blake Perkins from the Brewers and Jacob Young from the Nationals. So again, I think that neither, I don't think any of those guys are really all-stars, and but I think that PCA for sure is definitely better than all of those guys, in my opinion.
All right. And I'll take your word for it. Now, is there some defensive metric that we're using that outclasses them, or is this an eye test?
Yeah. No. We use outs above average and defensive runs saved.
All right.
So that's what we're going to kind of be looking at when we look at it. Now, when we look at the infield this time around, obviously we're looking at the one that we want to kind of look at right now is first base. And with first base, you're talking about Michael Busch, obviously, and this was his first full season in baseball, got him for a trade. And Dustin, I'm just kind of hoping this trade doesn't come back to bite the Cubs, because both the guys that they traded for him are doing really, really good in the minor league level, Zaire Hope and Jackson Ferris. So either way, Michael Busch, 26 years old. He finished the season with a slash line. He had 248 average, 335 on base percentage. He hit 21 home runs and 65 RBIs. So, I'm not saying that it wasn't, I think it was a pretty good first year as far as offensively, in my opinion. He slugged 440. So when you look at all of that, I think that offensively, you're going to be happy with Michael Busch on that, right?
Yeah, he's a little bit above average, right?
Little bit above average, right? So we said 243, 312, 399, and he hit 248, 335, 440. So definitely above average. But Dustin, the thing to me that really kind of was interesting is when you take a look at where he finished as far as outs above average. When you look at this here, he is in the top 10. If we're counting ties and stuff like that at first base, because there's a couple guys at 0-0 or 1-1. The best defensive first baseman was Carlos Santana of the Twins. And when you look at some of the names, you'll know Matt Olson was the best, not the best, but you have Bryce Harper in there, Christian Walker. The Diamondbacks have great defense. Anthony Rizzo still in there all those years. Michael Busch was number 12th when it comes to first baseman, but he was tied with Spencer Torkelson from Detroit, Anthony Rizzo, Freddie Freeman from the Dodgers, and Michael Busch is all in that category with one.
Right. But if you're talking again, I think you have to also separate this again. Like I said, I think this is a National League, American League thing. And based on that, I mean, listen, he's the 5th best defensive first baseman, and the names that are in front of him are all of them are all-star caliber first baseman, or you might even have him as a DH if they weren't playing first base. All these guys.
I agree with you. And the other thing to keep in mind is he had not really played. He'd been playing second base for the Dodgers last year. So when you think about it,
he's growing into the position. Yes, he's growing into it.
Yeah, and then when we take a look at defensive run save, slightly different metric, but yeah, again, with defensive run saves, Matt Olson from Atlanta is number 1, but Michael Busch is right there at number 6 with 5 defensive runs saved. He's tied with Bryce Harper. And so when you look at this in the National League, he's tied for the 3rd best first baseman in the National League when it comes for defensive runs saved. So as far as it's concerned, what grade would you give Michael Busch for his first year?
B-?
I think a B- is that is exactly where I was at too. I thought B- was a fair way to go. Hopefully the guy ends up just taking big step forwards as far as all of last year is concerned. But the one thing, Dustin, that I do want to say when we're talking about Michael Busch, and this is where you kind of look at the splits a little bit here, okay? And when you look at the splits, this is where it's really crazy with Michael Busch. Michael Busch, when you're looking at his splits, his average at Wrigley Field, Dustin, was 211, 299, 384 was his slash line. 211 was his batting average at Wrigley. Away, he hit 70 points higher on away games. 280, 366, 489. I thought that was
That's really interesting. Right. That is really interesting. Yep.
In April, he hit 282. In May, when the whole team couldn't hit, he hit 208. But then he jumped back in June when the Cubs were still struggling, 297. In July, he hit 261. But then he tailed off at the end of the season, 233 in August and 216 in September. So I'm wondering how much of that was just kind of fatigue in his first full season. I thought he played a lot more than I expected as well. I was expecting more of a platoon with him and Patrick Wisdom, and I didn't see that much.
No, Wisdom played way less than he did.
So next up, we go to our guy, Nico Hoerner, the subject of many trade rumors right now this season. When you talk about Nico Hoerner, he hit 273. He had 7 home runs, 48 RBIs. We said that he led the Cubs this year with 31 stolen bases. And when you look at the slash line for Nico this year, I think, just a good year. 273 was his average, 335 OBP. And he slugged 373. You're not going to get a power hitter out of them. So the numbers, for the most part, it dipped a little bit. But again, we talked about Wrigley Park factors. He hit 283 last year, 273 this year. He's right about where you would expect him to be. He didn't overshoot anything this season. Now, when we talk about the defense, that's when you kind of take a look and say, okay, well, how did he do in that category? And so with Nico Hoerner, again, when it comes to outs above average, there was only a couple guys ahead of him. He has 10 outs above average and only 1 from the National League. Otto Lopez was the only one that was a little bit better with 14 defensive runs saved. Cleveland, Andres Jimenez, we're watching him in the ALCS, and Marcus Semien were the best 2, and they're both American League. So Nico's still up there, but when you look at defensive runs saved, that's where he kind of took a little bit of a tumble right there. He had 4 defensive runs saved. So Bryce Terang from Milwaukee had 21.
Wow. That's just a big difference.
Right. And I wouldn't be shocked if Bryce Terang wins the Gold Glove there. Kettle Marte, he's great in Arizona. He's at 10. And Bryson Stott was at 7. So Terang, Marte, and Stott are all the Gold Glove finalists, and all of them were ahead of Nico as far as defensive runs saved.
All right.
So where would you go with Nico as far as grading out Nico on this one?
C+.
Yeah, C+ looks good. I remember when we were talking last year when we were talking about our predictions, I thought that he was kind of going to really have an even better year with the bat. I want to get somebody on the podcast that can talk to us a little bit about those park factors, because I want to know more and what we could possibly expect in the future, Yeah,
that's just it's a wildly interesting thing. Yeah, it's wildly interesting.
When we look at Nico's splits here, and this is where we're talking about, how he did at Wrigley versus how he did on the road. And this is something that a lot of teams are that a lot of these players that we want to take a look at home, he hit 260, 311, 329. That's his slash line. So he hit 287 on away, 359 was his OPP, and 416. So a difference of about 0.027 on that. It's not as significant as Michael Busch, but there's still a significant difference, right?
There's a difference.
In April, he hit 277. In May, when everyone's struggling, he hits 250. June, 230. bounces back in July, it's 262, August 280, and then take a look at September, 355.
I was going to say, I thought he had a really good September.
And so a lot of this, and we're not talking about really Cody Bellinger as much today, but a lot of this has to do too with injuries. And Nico was beat up at the beginning of the season. And so when you take a look at how bad he did in May and June, I'm sure that injuries were a big factor to that, right?
Yep.
So we'll see what happens. Next up, we're going to head over to the shortstop position where we get Dansby Swanson again going for another Gold Glove, which congratulations for Dansby on that one. With Dansby Swanson, we're looking here at how he did this year. He slashed 242, 312, 390. So that average 242, slightly, did we say below average on that one? Slightly, nothing shocking, but he had 16 home runs, 66 RBIs, 19 stolen bases. I don't think that offensively, here's the thing, Dustin, that year that he had his free agent walk year, I'm looking at this. I don't know if you can see this. For 2022, his walk year, free agency, he hit 277. That was 30 points higher than he did in 2021. And it's 30 points higher than he hit in 2023 and roughly 2024. Right. So that 2022, that offensive production that he had was by far, as far as average, on base, slugging, almost every category was just way off the charts, that he hasn't done before and hadn't done since. So with Dansby, I just kind of take a look at this and say to yourself, all right, well, he's not the guy that's going to be your offensive superstar. He's a guy that's going to go on hot streaks. He's going to be a guy that goes on cold streaks. He's not the guy that's going to carry you regardless of what.
There's too many of those guys on this team, though. There's too many roller coaster guys. Too many of them.
Now, with shortstops, Dansby Swanson is number one on outs above average, better than Bobby Witt, better than Francisco Lindor, Ezekiel Tovar, number one in all of baseball with 18 outs above average. As far as defensive runs are concerned, a little lower on this one. He was number 5 with defensive run save with 7. Ezekiel Tovar from Colorado is up there. Mason Wynn, the youngster from St. Louis, who really helped improve St. Louis's defense this year, had the most defensive runs saved. But, when you combine the metrics, Dansby is by far the best shortstop, and I wouldn't be shocked to see him with that Gold Glove once again. When we look at the splits, actually Dansby hit better at home than on the road. He slashed 257, 332, 428. But at away games, he slashed 227, 283, 354. So much better for him at home than on the road. When we look at month by month, in April, when the team was doing good, he had 235. How about May, Dustin? 155.
I mean, you just can't do that. If you're hurt, then you need to step aside. You can't be that type of a player batting where he was batting. I mean, finally they lowered him as the season went on, but making the kind of money he's making and hitting 153, come on.
In June, he hit 237. In July, he went down to 225, and then he finished strong. He finished at 261 average in August, 303 in September. But again, that May and June, it was the entire team that just ended up struggling, and that's why we are where we are, which is not talking about the Cubs in the postseason, right?
Right. Everybody had an off time at the same time. So like we talked about the roller coaster, everybody was on the incline together, and then everybody was on the decline together.
Now, this is where it gets tricky, Dustin, because the Cubs really had 2 different third basemen, right? In the first half of the season, you got Christopher Morel, who was given the job of third baseman. He was handed the job, and they said he's going to do it. And it did not go well for Christopher Morel this season. He slashed for the year, and remember, with 2 different teams right there, 196, 288, 346 was his slug. As far as home runs, 21 home runs, 60 RBIs, 8 stolen bases. But that average, 196. I mean, if you're going to have 196, you got to have 40 home runs.
Right. And that didn't happen.
No, he definitely got half that one. And so that's who you had in the first half. And then in the second half, Isaac Paredes came in, And when we talk about Isaac Paredes, he didn't have the kind of year that he was hoping to have either. Between the two teams, he slashed 238, 346, 393. He, just not really up to his standards. He had 19 home runs, 80 RBIs, 1 stolen base. So offensively, just not really. He didn't make that big of a difference that the Cubs were hoping. And that's the second year in a row, Dustin, that they went going for someone and trying to improve defensively or offensively at third base and weren't able to do it. Now, get this, Dustin. Third base on the fielding. This is the top guys. Joey Ortiz, again, from the Brewers, Matt Chapman. You got Nolan Arenado up there. No Paredes. Then when we get to kind of the middle of the pack, guys that were kind of just you could basically plug in any other average guy and that's what you would get. Isaac Paredes is slightly below that. So as far as Isaac Paredes is concerned, he was worth -1 outs above average. That's what he was worth. So he was roughly the equivalent of Manny Machado, who didn't have his greatest defensive year at third. Usually he's much better. Anthony Rendon's right there at -2, but those guys struggled. Now, when we go to the worst third baseman, Christopher Morel is right up there with outs above average. He was the worst third baseman with -14. So he cost whatever team he was on, the combination of the Cubs and the Rays, he cost them 14 runs because of his play at third base.
That's almost like you can't put him out there. I mean, that's awful.
Now, when you take a look at defensive runs saved, Isaac Paredes scores much better on that. He ended up with 19 defensive runs saved. So he's roughly where Jose Ramirez is, or Joey Ortiz from Milwaukee. Didn't look as bad. So he's able to make the routine plays, but when he can't make plays or he made mistakes, it ended up always costing the team, it appears,
Yeah.
So that's the infield right now. What grade would you give? We didn't grade Dansby Swanson. What grade would you give Dansby while we're thinking about it?
B+. And I think I'm being nice.
I'm going to go with C+ on Dansby.
Wow. C+.
I'll go B-. B-. Go B-. B-. Just what we were talking about is just, it's okay to have hot streaks and cold streaks. You just, again, I don't know
what we're talking, but wait a minute. Hold on a minute. Now I'm confused. Are we doing fielding or are we grading their overall year?
I'm grading their overall year.
Oh, I'm grading fielding. Grading fielding. Okay. That's, I thought this was about grading the infield, like their fielding, since we're talking Gold Gloves. I didn't know we were doing everything. Then a C-. Okay. I'll see your C+, and I'll lower you a C-. Okay. So now I understand what we're doing here.
Right.
I think the other two grades still would fit, but no, not on that one.
Yeah. The offense, was again, you come to expect some of that, but some of that was just really, really, really awful. Not good. All right. And then Isaac, with Christopher Morel, I think we know what we're giving him, right?
Yep.
Morel's an F. I mean, there's no way
I think the position's a D.
Right.
I think the position's a D because he's got to be part of it. And Paredes at best was a C-.
I would agree. C- on Paredes, 100%.
So F and a C-, you get a good old fat D.
And so, here's the thing, Dustin, is that Paredes doesn't cost you a ton of money, right? You got him under team control. Do they believe he's the answer? Or if there's a better answer, and we will take a look at free agencies, would it be smarter to continue to keep trying to shop that position at third base, try to find somebody with a little bit more pop than Paredes? Paredes, if you've looked at his splits, a lot of his splits on some of that, and we got to look at Paredes' split right here. He's some guy, when he was home, he hit 196, 315, 356, away 279, 379, 430. But when we didn't have him for the first half, but in the second half of the season, let's say July, he was struggling when the Cubs got him. He was hitting 136. When in August, 165 when the Cubs got him. And then in September, 288. But, if he can be a 288 hitter for the whole season, that would be great.
That's what you were hoping for when you did what you did. But and his defense, just a step above. I mean,
Well, here's the thing. He is able
Still
to
a lot to be desired.
He was able to make a lot of the routine plays. He just didn't look as good as we were hoping.
Yeah,
And
he's not
so,
slick. He's far from slick.
right.
Right?
But through the numbers, he'll make the plays that you need to. He's not going to cost you runs usually, but he's not going to sit there and save you a bunch of runs either. That's not going to happen either.
Yep.
So we got that. So next week we'll take a look at the outfield and kind of grade that out there.
All right. So outfield next. Now I understand the rules of engagement, if you will. You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast, episode 83 of season number 3, the 2024 Cubs infield grades. Don't forget to listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. You can email Crawly and I, flythew670gmail.com. Don't forget you can watch us on the 670 The Score YouTube page. In the segment, Crawly talking to the Tribune's beat writer, Meghan Montemurro, about her article on the recent conversation she had with Cubs owner Tom Ricketts.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, we are happy to have on the beat writer for the Chicago Tribune for your Chicago Cubs, Meghan Montemurro. Meghan, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am very much like Tom Ricketts in the fact that I am watching postseason baseball, but lamenting the fact that the Cubbies are not playing as well. You actually got to sit down with Mr. Ricketts, and you wrote a great article about it in the Chicago Tribune. You know, Meghan, I remember last year, 2023, at the end of the season, I think it was in Milwaukee, and they had just fallen short, and he came on marquee and did a whole lot of talking, but didn't hear much from him the offseason this year.
Yeah. I think it's interesting when listening to what he had to say during my conversation with him. I think it was pretty blunt saying that it was one of, if not, the most disappointing season in his 15 years of ownership, which I think is pretty telling given, what he and a lot of people around the team thought about this group coming into the season. So I do think that says something about, the ownership level of disappointment and frustration with how things played out. And, last year they could look at it as, oh, we made it to the final weekend of the season. We ended up only being one game out of the postseason. It's harder, even with the same record, to take that look at their season when you finish, 10 games back of the first place Brewers and 6 games out of a wild card spot. I think it was interesting to hear his perspective on how he views the short and long-term health of the organization and the position they're in. And, but obviously being disappointed with how the season played out, especially, before the season at spring training. Tom talked about how on paper, he thought they were the favorites to win the division. So, there's a lot of room that they, have to make up there.
Yeah. It's funny. We were looking at our predictions the other day from when the start of the 2024 season, and I had the Cubs at first, the Reds in second. Milwaukee was an afterthought. They lost Counsell, they lost Burns. I just didn't think that they were going to do it. And, it's got to be frustrating because, Shota Imanaga just absolutely, to me, I don't know about you, Meghan, but he absolutely pitched way better than I thought he would. I thought he was going to be a good pitcher. I didn't think he was going to have the season that he had.
Yeah, Shota's season was incredible. And I think maybe he gets lost a little bit in the attention he got because if you just look at his WAR, he was still top 10 in WAR, but, obviously the home runs he allowed impacted that. But you look at the rest of the numbers and, he was one of the best pitchers in the league this year. And so I think that's where, if you're the organization, there has to be a little bit of frustration of you look at the rotation as a whole and other than an IL stint here or there, the guys that they were expecting to count on coming into the season were pretty healthy and pretty good. You look at what they got from Justin Steele, Shota Imanaga, and Jameson Taillon. If they were in the postseason, that top 3 is pretty hard to beat among the other teams that made it. I guess maybe the Phillies had a better top 3 rotation of the teams that were in the postseason this year. And so I think in that regard, it does have to feel like a missed opportunity that, you had pretty good production from your rotation as a whole, even Javier Assad, pitching well again. And so Shota was obviously a big part of that. And I think organizationally it makes it exciting of like, okay, now that he has a year under his belt, what can he accomplish next year?
Now, one of the big questions going into next, speaking of next year, and you had an article, you talk about it in your article, Jed Hoyer, this is year 5 of his extension. He's been with the organization now for 13 years. And there was a quote, that you talk about it, that, hey, this is it, right? This is the contract. This is what's going to happen. I guess, like, part of me, I understand that. Like, Ricketts said, quote, he's under contract. That's the way I see it. But I guess part of me is concerned because, like, in that situation, when Theo stepped down, right, he still had a year left. And he was like, well, I don't want to make decisions when I'm not going to be here next year, right? And so with Jed, I mean, like, I just don't know. I remember also Joe Madden saying, oh, it's my free agent year. Yeah, that sounds great. But boy, if he makes deals that are more in kind of short-term saving his, what his performance is going to look like versus the team, And
I think from like a fan perspective, that's a completely reasonable feeling. I mean, I think, from Tom's position, like if he didn't have faith in Jed getting them to the postseason in 2025, then he would not let him have this opportunity in the offseason to get them back to the postseason. So I think there is trust from the ownership side of, they're going to get back. They're going to figure out, what areas of the roster they have to address to be able to fix that, especially when you look at the offensive issues the last 2 years. So yeah, I mean, there is a gamble, and it's why you see, especially on the manager side of things, managers will get a year tacked on, when they're heading into their last year of the deal. So it's not an issue, or it doesn't come up much during the season. But it's a big job, and they haven't gotten to the postseason like they should have. And I think it's a good test for the front office and ownership to, can they still stick to their principles, but also find ways to make meaningful, tangible improvements to this roster. And they should have a lot of money to work with. I mean, obviously Cody Bellinger's situation looms, and that will obviously take a good chunk of the payroll and the CBT. If he does pick up his player option. But if not, I mean, they have roughly $90 million under the CBT to work with for next year. So that can definitely get you improvements. I know fans are going to want a Juan Soto-like addition, but beyond that, there are ways to improve this team. And I think the biggest thing that the organization has to identify, and this would have to be the case even if they didn't bring Jed back, is why is the offense for the last 2 years going into these 2-month slumps that just completely bomb their season and put them in a hole that they haven't been able to dig out of the last 2 years? And so I think that's going to be the biggest question. They have the resources, both financially and through prospects, to make additions that can be notable enough to get them to the postseason. And as Tom said, it's on Jed to take advantage and use the resources he's given the best way possible.
Now, you mentioned the CBT, and it really seems like the Cubs are really, not wanting to be spending over that first tier. They did this year by $280,000 is what you put in your article, but it seems like that seems to kind of be the limit. And I guess for Cub fans, you're looking at the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Mets all in the championship series, all with the 3, biggest payrolls. And it just kind of like, it feels like, why are we as a fan base paying, say, the highest ticket experience price? Why can't we be in that conversation? Why right away do we have to say, okay, well, Juan Soto's not going to happen, but there's a lot of questions I guess fans have why that first tier of the CBT is like the limit that Tom really wants to go.
Well, and I think like it's not necessarily always the limit, but I think it is going to be interesting to see how they handle it this year. And he basically kind of kicked the can down the road when I asked him, like, would they be willing to go over it for a second year this year? And he basically was like, we got to see how things play out first. And so I think there is just a real hesitancy because of the penalties that, are enacted after you pass the tier for a certain number of years in a row, that, from ownership on down, they're just not comfortable being past it every year. And it's a completely fair thing for a fan to feel like this is a big market team. Like, you should have among the highest payroll in the league every single year. I mean, I fully expect them to be close to that tier. I mean, that's where they were at this year. Tom told me that, the expectation is they'll be around in the same financial situation for 2025. So they do have a lot of money to play with. But yeah, I mean, if you, and I think too, if you are going to go over it, like the Dodgers, like the Mets, you should be doing it for the Juan Sotos. And if that's not a contract they're comfortable pursuing, which seems to be the case, just based on, the last 5+ years of what they've done in free agency, then yeah, like, you're probably going to try and stay under it unless you really feel like you're going for it a year or two. And so, yeah, fans should feel frustrated when you're seeing some of the revenue streams that are coming in for the organization, and you're watching other teams, like you said, the Dodgers and the Mets be in the LCS. The Yankees are obviously always big spenders as well. And so it just doesn't seem like an area that the organization is comfortable tapping into on an annual basis. And so if that's the case, which that seems to be, then they're going to look for their spots to go over.
Now, we heard a little bit about the Cubs front office having a little friction. It was kind of like, I think Bob Nightingale kind of put something out there about that. And, it was Craig Counsell's first year, and he does have front office experience. Do you have any kind of feeling about this internal friction that was discussed? And do you, how much do you think that Craig Counsell is going to have, say, more input into kind of putting this team together than, say, David Ross?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think his perspective is valued, not only for how long he's been in this job, but before he got into managing, he, was in a front office role briefly with the Brewers. So he's seen both sides of it. He's coming from another organization that has, as we saw this year, found ways to win and get in the postseason where maybe they don't have the same resources or, opportunities they do as other teams do to play in free agency, and yet they find a way to do it. So certainly there's value there. And it's something that both Jed and Craig have talked about during the season of, he is a resource. It's good to have somebody who might not always be agreeing with, internal perspectives of things. I think discussion is healthy. And I think it's for, when you look at more broadly, when a team is falling short of the postseason, there inherently is going to be some internal friction or different perspectives of people thinking we need to approach it this way versus that way. So I would honestly be surprised if everything was just completely hunky-dory, especially for, a franchise that has made clear, like, we expect to be in the playoffs, like, annually, like that is the goal. And so, yeah, I think Craig is going to be an important resource in that, and certainly has already through the course of the season, shared his views and perspectives with Jed in the front office.
Another interesting point is that when they did get Craig Counsell last season, it was kind of late. And so basically all the coaches were under contract at that point in time, but now you're starting to see Craig kind of, make some changes as far as the coaching staff is concerned. Obviously Willie Harris being the latest, but do you see a lot more turnover in the coaching staff, or do you feel that, the changes that are made are changes that, are probably what's going to be, we're looking at probably what the coaching staff's going to look like come April?
Yeah. I mean, I think at this point, I know obviously the Willie Harris departure was somewhat recent, but I think you're kind of getting to the point of the off season where you're wanting to be evaluating like who's taking over the openings versus still evaluating the current staff. And now obviously there could be changes that happen if someone leaves for a job that would be a promotion in another organization. So I don't think you can definitively say like whoever's here is still going to be here in February. But I think you're kind of getting to the point where you want to be having your, targeted candidates, future hires, where you're in the interview process. Obviously that'll continue once the playoffs end as well, if there's any interest in coaches from those staffs. But yeah, I think you're kind of at the point where you're starting to try and look ahead to how you're filling out the staff.
And so, you're watching this postseason right here and seeing the bullpen arms, some of these bullpen arms and seeing, starters just not really go deep. The bullpen was kind of I think 2 years in a row, it's kind of been this weird, struggled for 2 months, then got really hot, then ran out of gas at the end of the season. Do you have any kind of feeling as to what the Cubs are going to do to that bullpen? Because, games count in April the same as they do in August or September. I mean, you can't sit there and blow as many games as the Cubs did in that first half of the season and all along with that offensive lull and still expect to happen. Do you kind of have a feeling, are they going to try to change things a little bit as how they approach the bullpen this year?
Yeah, I thought two things late in the season stood out to me. So maybe I think it was like the last week of the season, maybe last series, and talking to pitching coach Tommy Hotovy, he was asked about, the bullpen and how it found its groove over the course of the season. And one thing I thought was really interesting that he said was, looking back, they might have stuck with the guys that they felt confident would come through on the other end. Now he obviously, he didn't mention Adbert by name, but, maybe train too much, like, we're going to stick with this guy. He's going to figure it out, instead of saying, okay, like, maybe let's move him into a different role for now, give somebody else another look, and, not try to force a guy into a situation where it might not be working. And so I thought that was really interesting in hindsight for him to suggest that, because I think, I definitely saw it from fans who were frustrated by seeing them stick with guys maybe in the early season in moments that they just weren't pitching well. And so I think that's interesting. And he conceded too, like, yeah, of course you want to go into a season knowing you have a shutdown closer, but the reality is a lot of teams don't have that. And, so like a guy like, and again, this is me speaking now, like a guy like Porter Hodge, great rookie year, they don't know that they're going to get that again next year. And so I think part of it too comes back to the other point that I thought was interesting was Jed, when he was talking at his end of season press conference, just about how he didn't do a good enough job of building the bullpen heading into the season. And so I definitely think that's going to be a focal point. I don't think they have the appetite to sign, a top reliever for like a 4-year expensive deal, but obviously they do have, the prospects that they could move to get a younger arm that could be used in higher leverage spots. Obviously you're going to have some guys like, Luke Little come back from his injury. You do have Porter Hodge, and something that, Craig said in spring was that there's going to be a guy that pops on the radar who wasn't on the radar in spring that takes down big innings. And so like Porter Hodge was a very good example of that for this year. So there'll be somebody that emerges, a guy or two. Maybe Ben Brown becomes a reliever more consistently next year. So it's definitely an area they have to solve. And I don't think it's going to be an easy answer because, bullpens are notoriously volatile. And so that's a very hard area of the team to predict.
Huh. Well, Meghan, it's good to know that the owner of the Cubs is feeling the same frustration that the fan base is. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find your work and where they can find you on the socials?
Yeah, you can find my work on chicagotribune.com/Cubs. And you can find me on Twitter at _Montemurro.
Always fun to read your work. And it's always, you know what? I love seeing, especially towards the end of the season, some of the pictures that all the beat writers put up. Just the bond that you guys have is really kind of fun to look. We just love your work, and we appreciate you for all the work that you do in the season to kind of keep us up to date with our favorite team.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
This is season 3, episode 83. The 2024 Cubs infield grades are being handed out. Please leave us a 5-star review. Catch us on all the social media platforms. Email us, flythew670@gmail.com, and watch us on that Score YouTube page. All right, Crawly, we are down to the final 4 in Major League Baseball. We are starting with the NLCS, which began last Sunday night in Los Angeles.
Yeah, we got some marquee matchups here, but the wild card and division series was so much fun, so many thrilling games. But the first game coming out of the gate was kind of a dud, right? Jack Flaherty was on the bump taking on Kodai Senga for the Mets. Did not go well for Kodai. After getting Shohei Ohtani to ground out for the first out, he walks the next 3 batters to load the bases. Now he gets Will Smith to fly out for the second out, but Max Muncy hit a clutch single to put the Dodgers up 2-0. Bottom of the second, Gavin Lux draws a leadoff walk, moves to second on a bunt by Tommy Edman, scores on an Ohtani single. That's a 3-0 game. That would be it for Kodai Senga, who would pitch only an inning and a third, 3 runs, 2 hits, 4 walks, Dustin, 4 walks in an inning and a third. That's unbelievable.
That's atrocious for postseason play, right?
Right. Now, the Dodgers would break it open in the fourth with Tommy Edman, Shohei Ohtani, and Freddie Freeman all hitting RBI singles to increase the Dodgers' lead to 6-0. Mookie Betts, Dustin's pick for NLCS MVP, had the knockout punch, a bases-loaded double to score 3 runs. Jack Flaherty looked awesome. He pitched 7 shutout innings, giving up only 2 hits, and the Dodgers bullpen pitched 2 shutout innings. LA took game 1 9-0. That was 33 straight innings since the Dodgers pitching staff had given up a run. Just an unbelievable performance so far.
Yeah, that's a hell of a stat, because that was one thing. I mean, as these playoffs began, that I thought might hold the Dodgers back was their pitching.
Now, on Monday night, speaking of the pitching, the Dodgers went with a bullpen game. That didn't work out well. That scoreless streak we talked about ended quickly on Monday night.
Gone.
Francisco Lindor solo home run to put the Mets up 1-0. Then in the second, Starling Marte hit a single. Jesse Winker walked. Jose Iglesias popped out to second, but Tyrone Taylor doubled to score Marte and move Winker to third. Francisco Alvarez popped out for the second out, and the Dodgers intentionally walked Francisco Lindor to load the bases. Not a bad move in theory, right? The guy's hitting everything. Didn't pay off, though, as Mark Vientos hits a grand slam, and now
he was pissed. He was pissed. He was motivated. He felt disrespected by having the player in front of him walked. So
he's not going to be the only one. Any Dodgers fan who was late to the game couldn't have been happy, right? If you're sitting there trying to get to Chavez Ravine, the traffic jams, and now it's the second inning, 6-0. With 11 RBIs this postseason, Dustin, Vientos has matched Daniel Murphy's total from his historic playoff run for in 2015. I'm sure Mets or Cubs fans remember that clearly, as the guy was on fire in the NLCS when they swept the Cubs that year. He's one shy of the Mets record of 12, which Curtis Granderson and John Olerud share. Max Muncy hit a solo home run off of Sean Manaea to lead off the 5th. Manaea would run into trouble in the 6th when he walked the first 2 batters he faced, and then Freddie Freeman reached on an error to load the bases with no outs, and the Dodgers down by 5. Manaea's night was done. Phil Maton comes into the game. He gets Will Smith to pop out for the first out of the inning. Tommy Edman will single to score 2 runs. Dodgers cut the lead to 6-3. Freddie Freeman's on third with 1 out. They walk Max Muncy to load the bases, but Maton is able to get Kike Hernandez to ground into the old 5-4-3 double play to end the threat. The Mets would get an insurance run in the 9th and go on to win this one 7-3 to even the series. You know, Dustin, after that first game, watching the Dodgers pound on the Mets, I said to myself, boy, that looks like the magic dust has run out on the Mets. But, you know, now you're talking about a split.
Hell of a response. Hell of a response. Very impressive. Very impressive. We'll see if that carries over later on tonight. They will play game number 3 out in New York.
Yep. And speaking of New York, ALCS game 1 Monday night. Before the game, we found out 2 Cubs who are not on the ALDS roster for the Yankees made the ALCS roster. Anthony Rizzo back from that horrible fractured finger injury, and Marcus Stroman. So both of them available, and Rizzo did play on Monday night and on Tuesday night.
He's contributing. He's contributing.
The guy's just a gamer, man. He just is. We know him, and it's funny because I'm watching just some of the, you know, the way that he kind of like puts his hand on his head or gets excited. Just reminds me so much of the Cubs postseason run. Makes me miss the guy, right?
Yep, no doubt.
Game 1, former White Sox Carlos Rodon taking on Alex Cobb and the Guardians. Cobb's had an up and down year due to injuries. He's had problems lately with blisters and a cracked fingernail. He starts the game. First inning, he gave up back-to-back singles to start the game. He's able to get out of that. He gave up back-to-back singles with 2 out in the second, escaped again. He wasn't that lucky in the third. Juan Soto led off with a solo home run to put the Yankees on the board. He walks Aaron Judge, struck out Austin Wells, walked Stanton, got Chaz Chisenholm to fly out, and then walked Anthony Volpe to load the bases. He had a visit from the trainer earlier in the inning, and his velocity was noticeably down. After the third walk, his night was over. So in comes this kid, Joey Cantillo. He's a 24-year-old rookie, right? Oh, my God. How bad did you feel for him? Bases loaded, no outs, Yankee Stadium, and the kid crapped the bed. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He crapped the bed. I'm sorry. He threw a wild pitch. Aaron Judge scores. He walks Anthony Rizzo to load the bases. He then throws another wild pitch to score Stanton, and the Yankees are up 3-0 before Alex Verdugo mercifully strike out. So for the Guardians, they gave up 3 runs in the inning on a leadoff homer, 4 walks, 2 wild pitches. The Guardians finally got on the board in the 6th when Brian Rocchio led off the inning with a solo home run. That was the only run Rondon would give up in 6 innings of work. The Yankees would get that run back in the 7th on a Giancarlo Stanton solo home run. The Guardians would add 1 more run in the 8th on a Stephen Kwan RBI single. It wasn't enough as the Yankees take game 1 5-2. But, if you're going to gift the Yankees run in Yankee Stadium, good luck on that.
Yeah, exactly. Good luck on that.
Tuesday night, already down 1-0 in the series to the Yanks. Cleveland was hoping to get off to a good start. Didn't happen. First inning, former Cub prospect Gleyber Torres, who's having a really good postseason, he leads off with a double. Juan Soto singles to put runners at the corner. Then Aaron Judge is up, who's been struggling all postseason. He hits a towering pop fly. Shortstop Brian Rocchio, who's a really good defensive shortstop, mind you. The ball kind of drifts. He's almost towards now the second base side, and the ball hits off the heel of his glove. Torres comes around to score. Soto goes to second. New York is up 1-0. Yankees are not done. Bottom of the second, Anthony Volpe and Anthony Rizzo hit back-to-back singles to lead off the inning. Alex Verdugo doubles. That makes it a 2-0 game. Runners at second and third, no outs. Here's where it gets interesting, Dustin. Gleyber Torres pops out for the first out. Cleveland decides to walk Juan Soto to get to Aaron Judge. You talked earlier about being angry about being walked, walking someone in front of you to get to you. Aaron Judge is going to be a finalist, if not win the AL MVP. But Judge has been 2 for 15 with 1 RBI through the Yankees' first 5 games against the Royals and the Guardians. So they decided, hey, we're going to walk him. We're going to walk Juan Soto, who's been hot.
It's crazy.
To get to the cold Aaron Judge.
It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I understand why they did it. I'm just saying it's just crazy to speak it. It's crazy to say it out loud, if you will.
Right. And so it wasn't a bad move. Aaron Judge would hit a sac fly. That puts the Yankees up 3-0. It wasn't like he hurt you there, but Austin Wells struck out to end the threat. But do you think that the Guardians
their like star pitcher is out of the game at this point, Crawly? He lasted 1 1/3 innings.
Once again, yeah. The Guardians had their chance to get back in it in the 4th against Yankees ace Garrett Cole. They had the bases loaded with 1 out, but Cole struck out Garrett. He got David Fry to pop out to third and struck out Brian Rocchio to escape the inning. In the top of the 5th, the Guardians loaded the bases with no outs. Josh Naylor hit a sac fly to score a run. Lane Thomas would walk to load the bases again. Garrett Cole's night is over. Will Brennan grounds into a force out. Another run scores. Now it's a 1-run ball game. Andres Jimenez walks. Bases are loaded for the 3rd time in the inning before Austin Hedges strikes out swinging, and the Yankees still have a lead, Dustin. But that was the game right there, in my opinion. You had the bases loaded, no outs.
Right. They can't do anything with runners in scoring position. Who do they sound like? Maybe our favorite baseball team. I mean, They can't do anything with runners in scoring position, and that'll kill you in the postseason.
Absolutely. Garrett Cole, you had a chance. That wasn't his sharpest outing. He went 4 1/3, gave up 2 runs, 6 hits, 4 walks, 4 Ks. Yankees got one of those runs back in the 6th. Anthony Rizzo, again, contributing with a double that scored Anthony Volpe. Yankees 4, Cleveland 2. Bottom 7. Still a close game, right? Gleyber Torres singles. Juan Soto flies out. And then the big guy, Aaron Judge, hits a 2-run blast. First homer in the postseason to put the Yankees up 6-2 and give them a little breathing room. Jose Ramirez hits a solo home run in the 9th. Not enough for the Guardians as the Yankees take this one 6-3, heading back to Progressive Field, down 2-0. Do you feel that the Yankees poked the bear with the intentional walk of Juan Soto to get to Aaron Judge?
I hope so. I don't want this one to drag out. I don't think this is a very good matchup. So I could be all about a Yankee sweep, to be honest with you.
You remember I said Dodgers in 6 and I said Yankees in 5. I still think Cleveland's going to get a game, but the Yankees are just way that much better than the Guardians.
Yeah, no doubt about that. No doubt about that. So we got that game gets a day off. The American League Series, they're moving that series over to Cleveland, right? They'll be going at it on Thursday night then.
Right. And next time we talk, I got a feeling that both series will be done and we'll be ready to preview the World Series.
Beautiful. All right, Crawly, that's a wrap. Don't forget to download. Don't forget to review. Don't forget to give us a 5-star review. Nothing to predict right now. We don't want to get too ahead of our skis. Kind of still sitting on our same picks, right? Nobody wants to readjust their World Series prediction. So enjoy the games, and we'll get back at it early next week.
Yep, and we'll keep putting a microscope to this team and seeing what needs to be changed. Go Cubs! Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!